What I'm going to talk about today is what a lot of people are talking about across the world, and that's the aftermath of the now notorious interview with Andrew Tate and the BBC. But I'm gonna go a bit further than that. I'm not going to talk about Andrew Tate's political views or his legal trouble. I'm going to avoid that entirely. What I'm going to talk about is how that interlinks with the long-standing trend of appallingly bad, utterly incompetent and bad faith interviews that we have seen in recent times and in a few years ago by liberal journalists attempting hit pieces against various people. So the famous corpus of liberal car crash interviews would be, there's at least 3 with Jordan Peterson, the famous Cathy Newman debate. So what you're saying is, we've had a recent one with spaceman Elon Musk, and now we've had this Hindenburg disaster with Andrew Tate. And I'm not going to talk about the political views. What I am going to talk about is the overt and almost disturbing levels of incompetence by these journalists. Now, the world is full of incompetence, but what I find striking is that these are supposedly veteran professionals with degrees in journalism who are working at major global media outlets who claim to be world-leading and trailblazing and the best that the TV license can buy. But what we saw was a frenzied, fanatical, upside-down, back-to-front, clumsy, shallow, dishonest disaster of an interview. And Tate was right to dismantle her. I mean, the funny thing is that he destroyed her, metaphorically, but she also destroyed herself, which made it all the funnier. The best part for me was actually where he laid down the law and said, look, this is my house, you've come to my house, and you don't even have the manners to allow me to finish speaking. She didn't even have the professionalism to do that. And the really disturbing thing is that these people are convinced that they're competent. That Lucy, whatever her name is, she probably still hasn't worked out what's going on and why it went wrong. She set out to destroy Andrew Tate. He tells us now that they have spent months badgering him, saying, please give us an interview, sending him the questions that they wanted to ask, and as soon as the camera was on, the hit piece began. And they seem to have had legitimate questions, what's life like in prison, and what's your view on the Romanian justice system? First thing they do is just ad hominem. Really stupid ad hominem attacks. Things like, this anonymous charity that no one's ever heard of says that your name keeps coming up in classroom violence incidents. And it's like, what's that got to do with me? What's the methodology of these charities? She wouldn't have known. But okay, what's their methodology? Doesn't know. So it is these endless logical fallacies of adhering to authority and ad hominem attacks and just endless ad hoc reasoning and just bouncing around, desperately trying to get traction right. And he quite soundly and with relative ease destroyed her. I mean, the best one, of course, was Elon Musk, where the journalist says, there's a rise in hate speech on Twitter. And Elon says, what do you mean by hate speech? I don't know. And then about a minute later, he says, I don't use Twitter, by the way. And then Elon's like, how do you know there's a rise? Did you see this? This abysmally poor incompetence. I think if Joe Public was given the task of reading their script, they would do a better job than these so-called experts. these careerist industry leaders. I mean, they're just so bad. Not just in the content of their arguments, but in their ability to articulate these. They just fell apart. And we've seen it over and over again. The level of incompetence of these people. Imagine if they were lawyers in an important case and they were this bad. It would be career-ending. Name any other industry where you could be this ineffective and maintain a job. I can't think of any. But in their minds, they're doing well. And other people have mentioned this. It's the curse of groupthink, whereby these people are in an environment where, in order to get to the top, they have had to basically convert their entire psyche into this liberal progressive worldview, and that's very good for functioning within their industry. But when they go outside into the real world, oh dear, the real world doesn't accommodate your opinions from the 1990s. But even if they get chastised publicly, they go back into their own little enclave, and it's business as usual. They'll interpret their train wreck with Tate as a victory somehow. It's just the lack of self-awareness that's tied with their incompetence. Because if they were self-aware, they wouldn't have gotten into this mess. And I find that astounding. Again, how people can be this incompetent and poorly skilled that they think they can achieve anything. We've seen it over and over again. Every time they go up against someone who knows their brief, who knows who they are and what they stand for, doesn't matter what that is, and who has the ability to critically evaluate the script that the journos are regurgitating, and probably knows the script better than they do, by the way, they just fall apart. And that's all they have is a script. They don't even have a worldview. They don't even have an ideology. They don't even have a coherent system of thought. It's just a script. With Andrew Tate, what's the script with Andrew Tate? Andrew Tate, misogynist. Andrew Tate, bad man. That's it. No depth, no nuance, no reflection, no evidence, no coherent argument where suppositions are supported by fact. Just Andrew Tate, bad man. He says, well, what do you mean by bad? Boom, they fall apart. They're misogynists. Maybe I'm not going to talk about it, but the point is that they can't articulate their own accusations. The legitimate criticisms of Andrew Tate, and they are legitimate criticisms, actually come from the right. Other people in the growing restoration movement, as I call it. Those criticisms are actually far, not serious, but far more substantive than the Andrew Tate bad man nonsense from the left. Because they're actually legitimate civil criticisms. They're not attacks. They just think, we've all seen it. People say, well, I agree with what Andrew says here, but I don't think he's thought this through, or, yeah, that's okay, but there's a problem. They're legitimate criticisms, and they're more of a dialogue than just we declare you, banished from society. They're legitimate criticisms, and funnily enough, the best criticisms I've seen of Andrew Tate come from him, where he says, I'm not the best at this. I have got this wrong. I should have done this. My mistake. So again, it's just disturbing how bad these journalists are, and they are not long for this earth if they are really that far gone. And the irony of ironies, of course, is that Lucy and her team, they gave the Tate brothers millions in free advertising. They just wrote him a check and handed it to him. God knows how many people have seen that. The Tate brothers have probably made millions in new subscribers now. That's the funniest part. Anything else I'm going to say? Yeah, it's this pathological incompetence, and we've seen it over and over and over again. Oh, and here's one for you. If you want to see journalism at its lowest, bring up the James O'Brien interview with Jacob Rees-Mogg. It's about 4 or 5 years old. James O'Brien basically spontaneously combusts metaphorically on radio, TV, live radio, whatever they call it. He can barely talk. He's like a petulant, aphasic moron. And the frustration he has, because he's throwing all these cheap rhetoric, but what about this? What about this? What do you mean by that? And the person who's being interviewed is just plowed on regardless. When I saw that, I thought it was so bad, I thought Jimmy was going to get sacked. Anybody could have done that interview better than he could have. The cleaner, the office catering that could have done a better interview than he did. So there. So it's very. The other thing, it's unavoidable really, but I'm going to give my own views on why Tate is getting so much attack. I'm not going to talk about the criminal case, but I actually think it's far, far simpler than what he believes and doesn't believe and promotes and what he doesn't promote. The fact that the Tate brothers are simply out of the control of the mainstream media and that they have a large audience makes them dangerous. It's that simple, because the Tate brothers have completely bypassed the entire scandal control network that major Western organizations depend on. So let's say there's a scandal in a little town somewhere in the UK. National media could probably keep that under wraps, stop it from breaching a local news breaching the level above a local news story. But if the Tate brothers start talking about it on one of their shows, 200 million people Google it, and now it's an international story. And that, I think, is what it's about. It's about the simple fact that he can talk about what the hell he likes, and he can bring very embarrassing, strategically compromising information to the forefront. And they can't stop him, because he just says it on one of his shows, and it percolates through the independent sort of platform network. So that's it. It's just my views on that. Just the staggering incompetence of the leading journalists. they're not leading anywhere, and to treat them with the kind of revile that he does, I think is the most impressive things, because they are con men, incompetent con men. So.